Long ago, in a rugged and sun-drenched land veiled by olive groves and whispering cedar forests, two tribes ruled the highlands, the Khalidi and the Najari. Their lands were rich with grain and goats, and their hearts fierce with pride. But centuries of bitter bloodshed kept them apart. Skirmishes for water rights, retaliations for old betrayals, and ancient curses passed through generations like heirlooms. To speak a name from the other tribe was to spit upon your own blood. In this fractured world, love was not allowed to wander. But fate is not bound by tribal laws. It was during the spring of the third moon festival, when the wild poppies blanketed the hills like spilled fire, that Tarek ibn Farid, the son of a Khalidi chieftain, first saw Layla bint Samir, the niece of the Najari elder. Neither of them knew, as their eyes met beneath the high sun, that the earth beneath their feet would soon tremble with the force of a love that refused to die. And so begins the story of Tarek and Layla, two hearts burning in a world of ash and steel. The meeting beneath the poppy hills, the third moon festival, was meant to be neutral ground, a rare truce observed by both tribes in honor of the gods of spring and harvest. The festival took place on the borderlands, in the valley of the poppy hills, where red flowers grew over forgotten bones. For 3 days blood feuds were set aside, and the two peoples traded goods, performed ancient songs, and pretended they were not enemies. Tarek ibn Farid arrived on horseback with his father's caravan, wearing the green and gold sash of Khalidi nobility. Though tall and sharp-eyed like a hawk, he was more poet than warrior. He had only come for the books and spices sold by foreign merchants, or so he told himself. Layla bint Samir walked among the tents with her aunt, her dark eyes framed by a veil of sheer blue silk. She was known in the Najari lands for her skill with herbal medicine and her defiant spirit. Many men had sought her hand, but none could match the fire in her mind. Their meeting was accidental. A gust of wind carried a crimson silk scarf from Layla's basket, and it fluttered like a wounded bird across the festival path. Tarek caught it before it touched the dust, turning just in time to lock eyes with her. Neither spoke at first. The air thickened between them. Around them, the festival continued in song and color, but in that shared glance the world seemed too quiet. "You should be more careful," Tarek said, offering the scarf with a hesitant smile. "I am careful," she replied, taking it gently from his hand. "It is the wind that is bold." Their words were simple, but their voices lingered longer than they should have. For a few moments, names and tribes were forgotten. In those stolen seconds, they were simply two young souls drawn together by something older than war. But when Layla's aunt called her name, the spell was broken. She turned without a word, leaving Tarek to watch the sway of her blue silk vanishing into the crowd. He did not even know her name. Still, he knew. This was the beginning. Letters across enemy lines. The days after the festival stretched long for Tarek. He returned to the Khalidi stronghold in the stony hills of Karnal Ray. But his thoughts wandered far beyond its walls. Every corner of the fortress reminded him of her, the way the sunlight passed through the lattice screens, the scent of wild thyme in the evening air. He did not even know her name, and yet her eyes haunted him like a forgotten melody. But fate was not finished weaving its tangled thread. One afternoon, while delivering a cask of fig wine to the southern trade station, Tarek spotted a familiar veil of blue slipping behind a Najari merchant tent. He followed, his heart racing, not to chase, but to hope. There she was, carefully selecting rare roots and herbs from a trader's basket. "Are you real, or does the wind now play tricks on me?" he asked softly. She turned, surprised but not afraid. "I remember you, Scarf Catcher. Remember you, Wind Challenger." And so began their second meeting, a conversation clothed in riddles, glances, and the unspoken danger that circled them. They exchanged only a few words, but this time, names were not withheld. "Tarek," he offered. "Layla," she returned. After that day, they found ways to meet whenever the trade caravans passed, never in open daylight, and never for long. They would walk along the dried creek bed, where the border guards never lingered. Layla brought pressed flowers and tinctures. Tarek brought verses of poetry scratched on olive leaves. When the meetings became too risky, they began writing. With the help of a trusted servant girl from Layla's household, a mute orphan who owed her life to Layla's healing hands, Letters traveled hidden in bread loaves and woven belts. Each message a risk, each word a thread pulling them closer across the deep gorge of tribal hatred. Layla wrote of her dreams, to study medicine beyond the mountains, to see the sea. Tarek wrote of the stars, and how her name now lived among them. But love, in a land ruled by old grudges, is a dangerous fire. One night, Layla's cousin, a fierce Najari warrior named Idris, discovered a letter tucked beneath her sleeping mat. His face grew pale as ash as he read Tarek's poetry, his eyes blazing with betrayal. He did not confront her, not yet. Instead, he rode silently into the night, heading toward the Khalidi hills, with a message not of peace, but of warning. Blood in the olive grove. The sun had just begun to rise over the olive groves, when Idris arrived at the Khalidi border with a small band of Najari riders. Cloaked in silence, they carried no weapons drawn, only a letter. Tarek's final one to Layla, now dirt-stained and creased with fury. Idris demanded an audience with Tarek's father, Sheikh Farid, under the pretense of a diplomatic grievance. When Farid unrolled the letter, his face grew hard as stone. He read the words twice, not as a father, but as a chieftain. His son, heir to the Khalidi name, had broken the unspoken law of blood and boundary. To love a Najari was to spit on the graves of ancestors. Farid summoned Tarek at once. His voice was cold. "You bring shame upon us," he said, throwing the letter at his son's feet. "Do you not see what this is? Not love? Betrayal? You think they will love you back when war comes?" Tarek did not flinch. "I love her, father, and I do not fear her people. It's only our hate." Farid's reply was swift. "Then you are no longer my son." Within the hour, Tarek was exiled, stripped of title, horse, and home. Alone, he wandered through the olive groves that separated the two lands, unsure of where to go, but certain of only one thing. He would find Layla. But on the Najari side, things had turned darker still. Idris had not only exposed the lovers, he had poisoned Layla's name before the Najari council, accusing her of treason, claiming she meant to wed Tarek to weaken their tribe from within. Her uncle, Elder Samir, was torn. He had raised her as his own, but his loyalty to the tribe ran deeper than love. Layla was confined to her home, her every movement watched. The servant girl who once carried her letters was beaten and sent away in disgrace. The walls around Layla's heart grew taller with each passing hour, but she refused to recant her love. It was not betrayal, she told her uncle, through a tearless voice. It was the first truth I ever lived. Meanwhile, in the olive groves, Tarek waited. Each day he lit a small fire in the hollows of the old trees, hoping Layla would see the smoke. Each night he whispered her name to the stars, till one morning the sound of hooves came. Not Layla, but a Khalidi scout. War had been declared. A border raid had left 5 Najari shepherds dead. Whether truth or provocation, it did not matter. The treaties were ashes. And the flight before the fire, the drums of war echoed through the valleys like distant thunder. Both tribes gathered at their borders, sharpening blades and forging vengeance. Messengers rode through the mountain passes with news of raids, and the air itself seemed to hold its breath before the coming storm. But beneath the smoke of rising hatred, love still moved in secret. On the 3rd night after war was declared, Layla escaped. The servant girl, bruised but loyal, turned under cover of darkness and led her through the vineyard tunnels once used by smugglers long ago. Layla, wrapped in a traveling cloak, slipped past guards who had once called her kin. She left behind her books, her combs, and even her name. Only a single vial of healing herbs hung around her neck, a gift from her mother before she died. Tarek, still hiding in the olive groves with a band of outcast shepherds and old friends, saw her coming before she could call his name. He ran to her like a man reborn. "I thought they would never let you go," he breathed, holding her in the half-light. "They didn't," she whispered. "But love did." Their reunion was brief. The land no longer allowed lovers to linger. Word spread quickly that Layla had fled. Najari patrols rode out in fury. Khalidi scouts, too, hunted for Tarek, now marked as a traitor, and so began their flight. Across dry riverbeds and forgotten ruins, toward the western coast, where neither tribe ruled. For 5 days they traveled by night, resting only beneath the earth or under ruined temples older than either bloodline. They lived on figs and stolen bread. Layla nursed a fever from a cut on Tarek's arm, and he wrapped her frozen hands in his chest scarf, when the desert wind turned cruel. But it was not only the tribes they fled from, it was fate itself, and fate is not so easily outrun. On the 6th night, as they reached the cedar gorge that marked the edge of Khalidi land, they were ambushed. Idris had followed them. He and 4 Najari horsemen cornered them near a crumbled shrine, swords drawn, torches blazing. Layla stepped forward before Tarek could, standing between her love and the man who had once called her cousin. "You would strike me down," she said, her voice like iron wrapped in silk. Idris wavered, but only for a breath. "You have chosen exile," he said. "You are no longer of us." Tarek stepped beside her, unarmed but unflinching. "Then let us go," he said. "We ask for no home but the one we make ourselves." But Idris raised his sword. Before the blade could fall, a shepherd's horn sounded. From the hills Khalid exiles charged, scattering the Najari men with slings and smoke pots. Idris, outnumbered and furious, fled into the trees. Tarek and Layla did not wait. Hand in hand, they crossed the gorge as the first rain in weeks began to fall. Behind them, their tribes burned with war. The lovers reached the western coast by the turn of the moon, where the cliffs kissed the endless sea and no banners flew. It was a place forgotten by war, where the only lines drawn were by the tide. Among fishermen and nomads, they found refuge. Here, their names meant nothing, and so they began again. Tarek worked the boats by dawn, and by dusk he recited poetry to passing travelers, earning coin and bread. Layla, with her knowledge of herbs and healing, became known as the flower of the shore. Her salves mended broken limbs and softened old scars. Slowly, the villagers came to love them, not as strangers, but as necessary souls. But the past was never fully silent. News reached them in pieces. The war had burned long, and both tribes suffered. Fields went dry. Sons were lost. No side truly won, for the land itself seemed to mourn the hatred of its people. After 3 years, an uneasy truce settled like fog over the valleys. Peace, born not of forgiveness, but exhaustion, and the miracle happened. In the 4th year of their exile, a Khalidi merchant and a Najari herdsman, both wounded from separate fights, arrived in the same village. Layla treated them both without question. When they awoke side by side in her hut, each realized the woman who had saved their life was the same one once condemned by both their peoples. They spoke, and they listened. And when they returned to their tribes, they carried with them not just healing, but the truth of Tarek and Layla, of what love had survived, and what it had built beyond the fire. Years passed, children played in the olive groves again. Markets opened where blood once spilled. The tribes, still proud, no longer raised blades at the border. In time, Tarek and Layla returned, not as exiles, not as traitors, but as symbols of something older than war and stronger than law. They were wed in the valley of the Poppy Hills, where they first met, beneath a sky washed clean by spring rain, surrounded by olive branches and a sea of red flowers. And though the scars of old hatreds never fully vanished, something new grew in their place. Love had taken root, and it bloomed. The end.